and welcome to MyCounselor.Online. I'm your host, Brittany East, and joining me today as our featured counselor is Emily Hurst. Emily, before we jump into your article, which kind of dissects the difference between stress and anxiety, which is going to be so helpful for so many people, can you take a second to introduce yourself for those viewers who may not know you yet?
Yeah, I am Emily, and I have been a therapist with MCO for a few years now. I'm one of their certified therapists, and I am based in Denver, Colorado. I actually moved here a few years ago from Missouri, so still adjusting to all the snow. We recently got 9 inches, and it's been a whirlwind. Yeah, it's like, what is this? This is like more than Missouri would get in like 4 years. So yeah, still adjusting to that. I was also initially I was raised overseas in a country that didn't ever get below 70. So this is also just like a whole adjustment for me. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love getting to talk about these kind of topics and just answer any questions that come up.
Awesome. Yeah, that I totally get that. I lived in Colorado for a couple of years and it's like a life shift. Well, very cool. So your article is titled Anxiety versus Stress. So what inspired you to write this article?
Yeah, I think I just started realizing that a lot of people, myself included, sometimes think we're struggling with anxiety, but it's actually stress, or think, oh, it's just stress, it's not that big of a deal, but they actually are struggling with some chronic anxiety. And so my hope for this article was to be able to tease the two apart a little bit, which is difficult because they are very, very similar. So that people could know, is this stress, or is this anxiety? Is this chronic stress? Do I need counseling? So that way, when they go to a therapist, they might have a little bit better language to articulate what's been going on in their life, so the therapist can kind of help them navigate that.
Oh, no, that sounds really helpful. So when you wrote this article, did you have a specific audience in mind? Is it someone who is currently struggling with it, or just you feel like anyone can kind of benefit?
I feel like anyone can really benefit, but one demographic that really did kind of come into mind for me was young adults and teenagers. I think I meet with a lot of teenagers, and everything is always anxious for them, which is understandable because teenage years is a very difficult time in life, right? So much is going on. So part of my hope was also helping, if I wrote this, maybe parents would be able to tell, is their kid just struggling with some normal stress around school and tests, or is there something deeper going on? So when I initially thought of this article, it was for them, but it really is for everyone.
I really like that. Yeah, and it is true. I mean, I think even back to my own time, like teen or even college years, and it is true. I feel like that's so much intense pressure for a lot of different reasons, and it can get really convoluted. Because I feel like those terms are also just thrown out, oh, they're just an anxious person, or oh, I'm just under a lot of stress. It's not super kind of talk about, it's not pulled apart. We're not oh no, this is stress, this is anxiety. So I really appreciate that you had that in mind. So can you kind of expand maybe what the main differences are between stress and anxiety?
Yeah, and that's where it's understandably really easy for people to get them mixed up, because they are very, very similar, and they're rooted in the same things a lot of the time, which is fear.
Okay.
So stress and anxiety a lot of times can be boiled back down to a fear of something.
Okay.
Right. So a fear of failure, fear of disappointing, or fear that I'm not going to do well in this game or on this test, or fear of rejection. So a lot of the times it can be rooted in the same thing, but the duration and the cause is a bit different. So for anxiety, a lot of the times it's chronic, it's long lasting, it goes on, and you have it for more days in a week than you don't, right? So you kind of constantly have this underlying feeling of dread, of doom, of something's going to happen, and you just feel it more times than you don't, right? And there's no reason for it either, right? So anxiety is not in response to any external factor as much as it's just an internal thing that's happening. While as stress, so also can be rooted in the fear of I'm not going to do well on this test, or or I'm going to let my teammates down. But a lot of the times it is solely related to an event. Right. So you have a big work project, and the days leading up to it, you're really stressed. But once the work project is done, those symptoms go away. So it is shorter periods of time, and it's in response to a very specific thing, whereas anxiety is a little bit more mysterious and longer lasting, if that makes
Okay, that
sense.
makes sense. Yeah, kind of like anxiety is like you almost internally driven. You can't like pinpoint like why you're feeling this like intense either pressure or heaviness,
Mm-hmm.
um, or tightness. And then stress is kind of like you can point to it like, oh, I'm stressed because XYZ is happening. Is that
Yeah,
kind of like the summary? Okay.
yeah,
So
pretty
does
much.
each one, so like when you, so whether you're feeling it, do they present different symptoms then? Or can you tell them by like just symptomatically diagnosis?
Yeah. So again, like that's why it's hard for people to tell the difference because they present incredibly similar, like, right,
Okay.
racing heart, racing thoughts, kind of jittery hands, you want to fidget, just this like pit in your stomach type feeling, just nervous energy can kind of
Okay.
describe both. So they are very, very similar in that. Um, but anxiety, again, it's going to last longer. It's going to be
Okay.
pervasive. And it might feel even just more intense. So if you think about going into a test, like it feels intense, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do this. But anxiety, like we would maybe put stress at like a 3, and anxiety is going to be like they feel it like a 15. Um,
Okay.
and so everything is heightened with that.
Okay. And then I noticed in your article you talked about how like sometimes if you're almost like under constant stress, it can turn into anxiety. Do you mind kind of giving maybe a more like specific definition of the difference between like chronic stress versus maybe like a different stressful events? I don't know if that makes sense. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, chronic stress is like so if we kind of think about, um, almost like war veterans, right? They're under chronic
Mhm.
stress.
Okay.
Their environment is incredibly stressful all the time, and then it conditions their nervous system to anticipate that stress all the time.
Okay.
And it translates into anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Okay.
Because they were under it for such a long period of time that once they're finally removed from it, their body doesn't know that it's done.
Mm.
Um, and so it's the same, like if a person is under so much chronic stress and then they finally have it's over, like they've removed themselves from the environment or the relationship or the work, whatever, their
Mhm.
body still doesn't realize that it's done. It still
Wow.
thinks that that situation is happening, and it develops then into anxiety because it was so stressful for so long.
That makes sense. I don't know if there's a specific answer, even if you know this. Is there like a time frame of chronic stress where it's like most likely to lead to anxiety? Like, oh, 1 month, 2 months, or even like a week? Or has anyone ever studied that? Do you know?
To my knowledge, I don't know of any study, but there probably has been. I just haven't seen one or looked them up, to be honest. One, because I think it varies very much from person to person, right? So our
Okay.
thresholds are different,
Mm,
what we can endure before something happens, right? So two people could be in the same environment, and it would take one person a month to develop it, and it could take one person 6 months, just because of their like windows of tolerance and their thresholds for emotions.
that totally makes sense.
Mhm.
So, whether someone's experienced stress or anxiety, like, are there any like coping mechanisms that can really like help them to just kind of come down to a more calm state?
Absolutely. With both stress and anxiety, one of the things that's happening is our nervous system is increasing, right?
Okay.
That's why our heart starts racing faster. Sometimes we even feel a little bit flushed, and
Mm,
hot because your body is amping up and your mind is racing, and you're kind of leaving the present moment and starting to like worry about the past or the future, and you're not grounded in your body in the moment. So we call them grounding exercises. So
okay.
coping mechanisms, really healthy grounding exercises, because we're wanting to bring you back down into your body. And so just a really easy, straight across the board one is deep breathing. Breathing is such a powerful tool for people. I think sometimes it gets a little bit of a bad rep of like, oh, everyone always just tells me to breathe.
I mean,
Um,
really.
yeah, you're like, it actually is very, very helpful, especially if you do it correctly.
Okay.
So you want to like take in a really, really deep breath. So that's diaphragmatic breathing. Breathe
Mhm.
in from your gut, and breathe in for a few seconds. So like 3 to 4 seconds. And then we want you to hold it for like 3 to 4 seconds as well.
Okay.
And then exhale really deeply, and try and exhale even a little bit longer than you inhaled, because that's really just going to ground you back down into your core, and then hold it again for 3 to 4 seconds. And so we're kind of just going in this like square type shape of breathing.
Okay.
But the really important piece that I think a lot of people miss is the holding portions.
Okay.
'Cause that's what's going to slow your heart rate down. And if
Oh,
someone's on the verge of a panic attack, that's also what's going to stop them from hyperventilating.
wow. Okay.
So that really deep breathing, and then just with those pauses. And sometimes people don't like to put a pause at both ends, so that's okay. You can pause at the top or you can pause at the bottom. Just put at least one pause
Okay.
in there to help slow your heart rate down and calm yourself back down. And that's just a really, really great, like, basic exercise.
Mm.
Um, but what I do tell people is we don't normally breathe that way. At least I don't walk around
Right.
breathing like that. So you need to practice it. Like, you need
Okay.
to do it in times where you're not anxious. Because then that way when you are anxious, you're not going to be spending so much time thinking like, am I doing this right? This doesn't feel normal. Something about this feels off. It's
Mm.
really important that we practice it so we can get used to how our body feels when we breathe that way. Because it does feel quite strange the first few times that you do it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I like tell them you need to do several rounds of it. You can't just take one breath.
Okay.
And it's gonna, like, I would always say, try at least 3 to 4 deep breaths to give it a chance to really sink into your body. So
Okay.
that would be my, like, number one. If I could recommend any, it would be breathing, much to everyone's dismay. Uh, and the other thing with that too is, like, you can do it anywhere, right? Like,
Mm.
you can do it in a classroom and no one has to know you're doing it. You can do it in a work
Mm.
meeting, right? You can do it at a dinner with somebody. I have done it in sessions before when the session's really intense and I'm like, okay, like, a lot of energy is in here. I can just
Mhm.
take a few deep breaths to feel a little bit more grounded. So you can do it and no one has to know that you're
Mm.
using that coping mechanism.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying because I feel like sometimes with like stress or anxiety, or especially if it's kind of the chronic stress, I feel like sometimes the problems with like maybe coping or feeling like maybe I want to remove myself from the
Yeah.
situation is like, one, maybe sometimes you physically can't. Like,
Yeah.
if you're in the middle of class, you can't be like, I'm gonna go like
Yeah.
do this, or like in the middle of a test. But I like that it doesn't have to be something where people notice or make you feel even more awkward or like uncomfortable, maybe how you're already feeling, but it's something you can
Yeah.
kind of like, it's a moment for just yourself, that,
Mhm.
which is, I just really appreciate that because I feel like, I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. My 6-year-old, I don't want to say he's anxious, but he's easily stressed, I will say at this point.
Okay.
And it's funny, yeah, because we try to do the breathing. He thinks it's dumb every time. But I definitely, but I understand what you're saying about doing it when it's not a stressful time, because every time I suggest it when it's stressful, he's like, please stop.
You don't need this.
I don't need this right now. But I've also noticed there's times where he like does it himself when he's like getting that way. And I think it does help calm him. But I'm like thinking he's 6. When he's 16, I definitely want him to feel like he has these things he can do that feel safe, that feel socially normal, that no one's gonna like point out or like make him feel worse for. So yeah, I really appreciate the like emphasis you're putting on this, that like it seems silly and easy or whatever, but actually it can be like a really like long-term practice that can really help anyone in any
Yeah.
situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I think it's such a powerful one. And what I would note too with it is, like, I always tell people, pay attention to how your body feels as you breathe.
Mm.
Because we think it doesn't work, but pay attention to your heart rate.
Mm.
Pay attention to how your shoulders feel as you deep breathe, because then you're going to start noticing your body is just starting to relax a bit. And then even just being able to notice that it's working, even just slightly, calms you down.
Mm.
Um, or sit there and like, it's not working, then we get more amped up.
Okay.
So just even being able to notice how your body's responding to it will be another exercise and grounding exercise to really just recognize, like, okay, this is working, and they'll start kind of bringing everything back down for you. So yeah.
No, I love that. Are there any other techniques besides the breathing that someone can use if that kind of feels like maybe tough or they're still kind of getting used to it?
Absolutely. There's so many. So one is called, I think a lot of people call it the 5 4 3 2 1. That always really confuses me because in theory you're supposed to go through like 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3, and then I start getting confused and like, which one am I supposed to do 3 of?
Wait, I didn't
Like,
count enough.
yeah, did I count enough? Like, did I reach the quota? So then I always just say, like, just go through whatever you can see in all your 5 senses.
Okay.
So, because again, that's going to force your mind to focus on your present moment. And it's also going to force your body to become really aware of its present moment instead
Okay.
of it going in a million directions. So this one's also really helpful, like if you're trying to go to sleep. So I don't know about you,
Mm.
but I'm the type of person who I lay down for bed and my mind's like, remember when you said this in 5th grade? And I wonder if they are still thinking about that. And I'm like,
100%.
like, thanks for that one. So I'm like, my mind needs to like not be in my most embarrassing moments of my life and just needs to be here with me. So that will help you. So you just go through like, what can I hear right now?
Mm.
Can I hear the fan? Can I hear my white noise? Can I hear like my sheets rustling as I move?
Mhm.
What can I see right now? So if you're trying to sleep, hopefully your eyes are closed and you could say like, I see darkness, or I see the little like lights that flutter around when we close
Yeah.
our eyes. What can I smell? I can smell my essential oils. I can
Mm.
smell the shampoo in my hair. What can I feel? I can feel like my silk pillow sheets, right? Like just going through all of your senses, and
Mm.
just listing as many things as you possibly can that you can experience from each of them will really bring you back into the present moment and ground your body as well. Um, and again, with that one, the thing with all of these is they're really good if they're coupled with breathing. So,
Okay.
so
Yes.
that's why, yeah, can't stress that one enough. So that's why it's really good to get the breathing down, because then all the other grounding exercises that you'll find on the internet or that we'll talk about here are coupled really, really well with
Okay.
breathing.
Yeah.
So I would say the 5 senses one. You could also, imagination's really powerful. Our brains are
Mhm.
incredibly powerful. And so even just imagining a calm place for yourself. So
Mm.
imagine a place that you feel stress-free. Imagine a place that is your happy place, or imagine sitting with someone that makes you feel calm.
Mm.
Um, right. So we tell people if you're cold, imagine being in a warm place, and it kind of helps make you less focused on how cold it is. The same can be said if you're stressed or you're anxious, you're
Mm.
feeling your nervous system increase. Imagine something that calms you, and just sit in that space for a second. Close your eyes, breathe it in. Um, and that can also help calm your nervous system down.
No, that's really cool. I really appreciate even too just the specific examples you gave. 'Cause I feel like sometimes, at least for me, I'm like thinking like, oh, what would I listen or see or like hear or taste when I'm like in bed? I think sometimes we
Yeah.
think like, oh, when I'm outside, there's a lot of things, but I
Mhm.
think just even that like mindfulness, it almost takes into account like really paying attention
Yeah.
to noises or things like that is, I don't know, it's really cool. I appreciate like those like specific examples.
I've had lots of
That you do.
practice with it.
You're like, clearly I'm doing this.
Yeah. They work, guys. I promise.
So I'm just curious though, because I feel like at least sometimes people wait until it's like their anxiety is almost like debilitating or
Mm,
like it's interfering with like day-to-day activities before they seek counseling.
yeah.
I mean, I know you're a counselor, but I mean, from your experience or even like research, does it help to go to counseling like before then? Or do you feel like, no, it's only really makes sense to go once you do reach that kind of critical point? Like, what's your experience?
Yeah. I think it's helpful to go before then. Again, I am a therapist, so and a counselor. So I definitely am like everyone can benefit from it. Like there
Yeah.
doesn't have to be any qualifications. If you want it, come get it. We want to help you. Um, but yes, I do think it can be helpful because sometimes like we get stressed over things that we wish we didn't get stressed over. So we're
Yeah.
like, I shouldn't, which should is a very dangerous word, but people will say like, I shouldn't get stressed over this, or I shouldn't get this easily
Mm.
stressed. And so maybe we want to help you figure out like, what is it about this that really overwhelms you?
Okay.
Um, so stress is also just as valid of a reason to seek out counseling as chronic anxiety is. Because the other thing is we don't want it to turn into anxiety. We want to kind of stop it before it progresses. And so I think anyone could benefit from it.
I really appreciate that. So, is there any final piece of advice you'd give to someone who's like watching this and like kind of new to the idea of differentiating like stress and anxiety?
Um, yeah, I guess I really want people to know is that it's really easy to interchange them. Like I even sometimes will catch myself saying like I'm anxious and I'm like I'm not, I actually don't have anxiety. I'm really stressed about this work deadline or whatever. So it is really easy to interchange them, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I don't, my heart behind this article is not to shame a person for using anxiety when it's actually stress or anything like that. It's really just to help you understand, like, am I struggling with one or the other, and then how can I help myself? So I just want you to know that, like, if they're interchanged, that's not the end of the world. I want parents to be able to know, like, is my kid just struggling with normal stress, or are they actually anxious? And I want, friends to be able to spot that in their friends, or people just to be able to spot it in themselves. So it's not about shaming a person for using the wrong word. It's about equipping you to know, like, how maybe severe you're struggling with something is.
Well, Emily, thank you so much. I read your article, but I feel like even talking to you has just like even kind of like, not the right word, beefed up, or just like added a lot good, like to like understanding your article even more. Yeah, I really appreciate it, especially being kind of like you talked about, like being a mom and like noticing this in my kids to be really helpful. Because I feel like even for myself, like growing up, I was again, people describe me like kind of anxious, but like maybe I was just feeling a lot of stress and didn't know how to cope with it. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to like write this article and expand upon it.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
And thank you so much for everyone who joined us today to watch. We have so many article videos that we have taken the time to record for you so that you can kind of feel a bit more equipped, especially if you're new to counseling, or even if you see a counselor regularly, just to maybe broaden your horizon of things that you can do to manage whatever you're going through. If you want to search our past videos, you can just find us on YouTube. If you search MyCounselor.Online Christian Counseling, you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram if you search Love My Counselor. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on My Counselor Online.